Welcome to Epic Begins with One Step Forward, the podcast that reveals how to plan, achieve, and enjoy the journey of creating epic results in your life, business, health, and relationships. Here's your host, best-selling author and motivational speaker, Zander Sprague.
Hi there and welcome. I'm Zander Sprague, the host of Epic Begins with One Step Forward. And today I'm so honored to be joined by Dr. Heidi Horsley. Hi, Heidi.
Hi, Zander. It's great to be here.
And today we're going to do another chapter on Epic Unexpected. And Heidi and I are both sibling survivors. We've lost siblings. She's going to tell us a little about herself, the work that she does, and then I'll recap what my loss was. She'll talk about her loss, and then we'll see where we go. So Heidi, tell us a little about who you are.
Okay, so as you said, I'm a surviving sibling. When I was 20 years old, my 17-year-old brother Scott and cousin Matthew, who was also 17, were in a car together. Matthew was driving. The car hydroplaned, hit the side of a bridge, and they died instantly. The car basically blew up. So it was very traumatic. It was very sudden, and it basically turned my life upside down, as Zander, because you've been there.
Yep.
So it was an existential journey. So when I went through it, I basically had to reevaluate, why am I here, and what do I want to do with my life? And so I basically felt, you know what, I'm here to help others find hope after loss, to work with other siblings, to work with other individuals that have had a loss. And that's basically what I've done for my career for the last 25 years. So I've been doing it for a long time. It's great though. I love it.
That's great.
Yeah.
And I've known you now for many years, and the work you're doing is phenomenal, and it inspires me to do the work I'm doing. And just as a reminder to the audience, I lost my sister Lucy in 1996. She was murdered, and she was 30, I was 28. And I think something that both Heidi and I experienced was that there was a real lack of any kind of support for us in our loss. We talk often about how siblings are the lost survivors when there's a death in the family. And Heidi, how does that resonate with you?
I definitely feel that that's true, Zander. They are the lost survivors, and sibling loss is a very minimized loss. It's a very unacknowledged loss. I wrote my doctoral dissertation on the sudden death of a sibling way back in 2002. And at that time, there was not a lot of information out there. There was not a lot of academic literature out there. And today, there's more. As we know, you have a book. There's more out there, but there's still not enough. You know that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's one of the things that's funny is I wrote my book and got into talking more about sibling loss and wanting to help siblings, because my experience was that no one asked how I was. And right. I think that had a direct effect on me after Lucy's death. And there was a friend of mine who made this offhanded comment after her brother died, and I was having coffee with her. And she said, I was in the bookstore, and there were lots of books on loss of a parent, loss of a child, loss of a pet, but there was nothing on loss of a sibling.
Right.
And as I walked away, I was like, wait a minute, I know that. I could write a book about that. And so I did. And I think both you and I are mental health professionals. We talk to lots of people, but I think there's so much, as you said, that's not understood about sibling loss. And one of the big things is that unacknowledged grief. So many people asked how my parents were, and I get that. But as you have pointed out so eloquently, Heidi, that when you lose a sibling, you lose your past, your present, and your future.
Yeah, you do. And I think you mourn the life that you thought you were going to have. And because it's a different life. And who am I without my brother? Who are you without your sister Lucy? Like, we have to redefine who we are at this point. And as you can tell, I live in New York City. It's behind me. And I'm here because I work with people that are grieving. And I moved back here in 2001 to work with firefighter families who had lost someone in the World Trade Center. And tomorrow is September 11th. What I want to say about that is I thought when I moved back here and worked with the FDNY that because 9/11 was such a public event, that siblings would be acknowledged and validated. And while I worked with bereaved widows, bereaved children, bereaved parents, it wasn't until year 5 that I was given permission and funding to work with bereaved siblings that had lost someone in the Trade Center.
That's amazing.
I know, right? So I found that really fascinating because I was like, okay, even at that level, there's still an unacknowledgement.
Yeah. And what do you think, Heidi, is the effect on siblings?
I think sometimes, and you know this, Zander, we don't feel like we have the right to our grief. Because if you say, I have a sibling that's died, the response from people is, how are your parents? Or you need to be strong for your parents. And we know that. We know that our parents are not usually doing well. And when someone says that, all of a sudden you're now talking about your parents. You're not talking about yourself.
Right. And some people may not know this. I know you, obviously we know this. The longest relationship you have is with your sibling in your life.
Right, exactly. And even when they're not here, that relationship continues. And 3 years ago, I designed a class at Columbia University called Traumatic Loss During Childhood. And what the class is that I teach is it's looking at when we have losses in our lives, how does it impact us throughout our entire life course? Right now, the fact that Scott and Lucy died is the reason that we do the work we do. They're still having a huge impact on us.
Oh, absolutely. It fuels part of the work that I'm doing. It fuels a book that's going to be coming out, which is for parents to understand their living child's grief, because I kept getting asked by parents, as you did probably, I lost my son or daughter, but I have other children. I never see them grieve. And so I wrote the book to try and help the parents to understand the sibling survivor experience, some of the changes that go on in families, the expectations that parents may not be aware of that they now have on their children. I was the middle child, and now technically I'm the oldest child. The oldest child has certain responsibilities and expectations and all of that.
Yeah, it's interesting when your role changes, isn't it?
It is, especially when you're an adult and all of a sudden you're like, I have no idea how to do that job.
Yeah.
And there are obviously so many changes, but there's also, I think, so much of the unacknowledgement has such a profound effect in different ways on people. And just through some research I did, there's over 1 million new sibling survivors in the US alone every single year, never mind worldwide.
That's amazing.
It is. And look, that's across all ages. That's just taking US Census data of how many children per family and death rates and doing some complex math on it and coming up with that number. But that's a lot of people who are walking around. And here, I got a question for you, Heidi. When you talk about, you meet someone new, you talk about your work, are you still surprised when someone says, oh, I lost a brother or sister, and how often that happens in a given week or month?
How someone else will say it to me, you mean?
Yeah, like you run into people, and there's so often, I know I find when I talk about my work, and I shouldn't be surprised, but somehow the number of times in a given month that someone will say, oh, I also lost a brother or sister. If there are 1 million new people every year.
Right. That's a lot of sibling loss.
Yeah.
And sometimes siblings, like you said, don't talk about it unless they find out that we've had a loss, because like I said, society for some reason has a hierarchy of whose loss is worse. And I always say the worst loss that can happen to you is the one that's happened to you. And, yet we're given this idea that, okay, the death of a child is much worse, and the death of a spouse is much worse, and the death of a parent is much worse. And that's not necessarily true.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I think loss of a sibling is equally. It's not a competition, so it's equally
Right.
as devastating. But I know that Lucy knew me better than I knew myself. Most siblings know, you know your sibling better than they know themselves. By and large, they're one of your best friends. There's obviously the tension. They're the people who say, oh, I have terrible relationship. But the fact of the matter is that we're there for our siblings. You just expect that they're going to be there until a certain age. And I thought my siblings will be around until we're all at least 75 or 80. And then you get into that time frame where it becomes, and I hate to say acceptable, but you say, okay, this is the time period where people might die. Certainly not in our 20s, unless
Right.
there was a pre-existing health condition that you always knew that there might be a chance.
According to the research, most siblings will spend 80 to 100% of their lifetime with their sibling.
Yeah.
On the earth. And so it's not the natural order of things that Lucy and Scott died when they did.
Exactly. How would you say that the loss of Scott has affected your work? I think I know the answer, but I still want to put it out there.
It's taken fear away. And I know that sounds really strange, but when I worked on a Columbia University research team with the fire department, we did a 10-year longitudinal study looking at traumatic loss over time in firefighter families. There was a team of 12 professionals, and it was an interdisciplinary team. I was the only one that had a sudden traumatic loss in my life in that room. Now, you would have been a great person on that team. You would have been a big value add, right? Because they had murdered children and siblings on this. That's in 9/11. That's how they lost the firefighters. Every single professional, Zander, said that we did all home visits, and they said that their biggest fear was going into the home for the first time into a grieving home. I had no fear around that because I've lived in a grieving home. I know what it looks like. It didn't matter what I saw. If I went in and the parents, were on the ground crying or the siblings were screaming, it doesn't matter. I've seen it all. I've been around it. I'm comfortable with it. I run towards grief and loss to help people. There's no fear. So that was a big takeaway for me. I was like, wow, these people are afraid of what they're going to find, and I don't have that fear.
Right. And obviously, here in the United States, we really don't have any rituals or anything around death. Frankly, our way of dealing as a overall society with death is to treat it like the most communicable disease in the world because, oh my gosh, Heidi, you've had death. I got to back away because I might catch it, right? And yeah, I mean, that idea that, I know I live in a grieving household because although 22 years has gone by and it's not nearly as painful, I miss Lucy every day. I know my mom misses Lucy. I know my sister does. And you see it all the time.
I think that's one of the biggest takeaways for me, Zander. Even though it's been over 30 years for me, I still miss my brother tremendously. And I don't have pathological or complicated grief. And what's interesting is they did a study in 2012, and it found that continuing bonds are strongest between siblings and their sibling that died, even when you compare it to parent and child loss. The sibling bond ends up being the strongest over time. I think about my brother all the time. I wonder what he's going to do. I make decisions based on him. I have 2 children because I had a brother. I know that sounds strange, but in 1998, when I had my son, I couldn't have other kids. And I wanted, and my husband said, we've got 1 son. It's great. We live in New York City. It's all good. I said, come hell or high water, he's going to have a sibling.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't have said that had I not had a brother die.
Right.
I would have had 1 kid and it would have been good. So in 2006, my sister Heather and I flew to China and adopted baby girls so that we could give our sons a sister. that would have not happened. So my brother influences my decisions even today.
Oh,
And I know that
absolutely.
Lucy influences yours. I mean, she's probably influenced the fact that you're doing what you're doing with this epic podcast.
Absolutely. There's no doubt. And you and I are on this epic journey, as are millions of other people who have lost siblings. And it's a journey that evolves and continues and is different for everyone. And you and I choose to stand up and make a heck of a lot of noise about it, so that we're both, I think, fighting hard for sibling loss to be more fully recognized. Where
To make lemonade out of lemons, Zander, as your book says.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I think it's also, it takes, without sounding like I'm blowing our horns too much, it takes people like us who say everyone who's experiencing this needs help, and we're here to help, and we're here to speak out about it and raise the awareness, so that hopefully that conversation is not only how are your parents, but how are you doing? How are your brothers and sisters doing? And I know through the work that you and I do together in the Compassionate Friends, the sibling community within there is a gigantic family, and it's so wonderful.
It is. It's amazing. And there's nothing better than being around other siblings, because I think it really normalizes what you're going through, your experience. And you realize, hey, I'm normal. I'm not crazy. I'm not alone in this,
I think that not being alone is a huge part of that. And I think one of the things that the first conference I went to, and at that point I was already like 15 plus years into my loss, but I was talking to someone who had recently lost a sibling, and her comment to me was, it was so great to be able to talk to someone else who understood it all, so she didn't have to explain all the feelings, that I got it. I'm like, yep, I got that. So that we got to actually talk about the parts that mattered, not trying to explain to someone to get them to understand your experience, which no one else can, because they haven't experienced that.
Absolutely. It reminds me, we're living in COVID-19 times right now. And back in March, I tested positive for COVID-19.
I did.
And the thing that was interesting, and the siblings got this, the first thing that happened when I got a positive COVID-19 test was, my very first thought was, oh my God, my parents can't lose another child. It wasn't even about me, Zander.
Oh,
it was
absolutely.
Right, taking care of my parents, which is so the way that we function. It's like, we've got to take care of our parents. This can't happen to our parents.
Yeah.
It was an interesting thing that happened. And then the second thought was, Scott, help me get through this, help me survive. And the third thought was, how am I going to do this? I'm going to do it the same way that I got through the death of my brother. I'm going to use the same coping skills now that I used then. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And just branch off a little from the sibling, but the epic unexpected, as far as I know, you can't smell or taste still.
No, I can't. There is zero smell and zero taste. It's very strange to lose 2 of your 5 senses. Yes, I haven't been able to smell or taste anything for 5 months.
Do you want to take a moment and maybe share what that epic journey is?
You know what's interesting about it? Smell and taste help us to feel better.
Yeah.
So when we're feeling down or depressed, think about your life. You're feeling down or depressed, smelling flowers, smelling something good, smelling your cooking, baking something for yourself, being able to taste it.
Your favorite food. I'm feeling sad. Let me have my comfort food.
Yes. Tasting a nice glass of wine, all of these things, tasting a nice cup of coffee in the morning. Coffee to me tastes like hot water, and wine tastes like cold water.
Oh,
that's
so sad.
It's the only good thing about this is, after my brother died, we got a Shih Tzu puppy, and it really helped my family heal. During the pandemic, I got a Shih Tzu puppy. We got a Shih Tzu puppy, and it's helped a lot. It's helped us to heal through all this, and it's helped my daughter a lot. but I can't smell it when the dog goes to the bathroom. So it's a beautiful thing. I get to be on cleanup duty all the time because my family's, you can't smell, Mom, you come and clean it up. I can't smell anything. I can't.
And if I'm correct, you also have, is it a French Bulldog?
We have a Boston Terrier. That's my son's dog. Yeah.
Boston Terrier. Okay.
Yeah. Sibling dogs. We had to get sibling dogs together. My daughter got one. My son got one.
Of course. Of
Right?
course.
You have to have them in twos.
Exactly. Exactly.
You know that. You got your two daughters.
Exactly. Exactly. And it wanted to just, if we can, just take a few minutes and talk about what your sibling survivor experience, what it's been, how you see that evolving over the last 30 years.
With me and my sisters?
You and your sisters, you personally, just that whole...
I'm the oldest, and so my birth order didn't change. I'm always fascinated by people's that did.
Mm-hmm.
My brother was the only boy in a sea of girls.
Mm-hmm.
He was the family hero before he died. We fought, the girls fought a lot, but we didn't fight with him. He was the only boy. He was very mellow. He varsitied in 3 sports. He was like most valuable player. He was like everything.
Right.
So when he died, we all felt like the wrong child died.
Mm-hmm.
We absolutely felt like the wrong child died. This was the golden boy, and we loved him. And that was a big thing for me to deal with, is the survivor guilt I had. And it wasn't until I got around other siblings that I realized that was normal. My sisters and I are really close. We actually got closer after my brother died, especially the sister that's only 16 months apart from me. We used to fight a lot. But once my brother died, we got really close. They're my best friends. My sisters are my best friends today.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, that I think I appreciate having siblings, and I realize I don't take it for granted. I realize that we don't know how long any of us have here. You know that, and I know that because we both had very sudden losses and at very young ages. So I think even with my kids, I don't take those kind of relationships for granted. And when I see my kids together and they're very close, I love it, because it reminds me of all of our memories with our siblings, right? Seeing your daughters. I love some of the sibling stuff you post with your girls walking hand in hand. What better gift to give us? It's wow. Thank you, kids.
I know. And actually, I do have quite a few pictures. I love when I'm behind them and they are each other's best friends and they take pictures. I take pictures of them as they're walking, holding hands. And then for Father's Day, they put a collage together of all of these pictures that I've taken of them in different places, walking, holding hands. And for me, you're right. It's when I see that, it does remind me of how important that sibling bond is and how all-encompassing that, how important that relationship is to your whole entire life. There's so many things that you talk about and I know both your parents and they're fabulous people, but look, they're your parents. There are times where they drive you up the wall.
Of course. And then you go to your siblings and talk about it.
And you go to your sibling to complain about, oh my God, Mom's going crazy. She's driving me up the wall. Mm-hmm. And I've talked to, as I'm sure you have, lots of siblings who lost their only sibling, and they're like, I got no one to complain to about my parents.
Yeah, that's really hard. And I want to say, for those of you out there that had adversarial relationships or ambivalent relationships, it's normal with siblings because we try on different roles. There are safe people and we fight with them and we love them and they're our confidants, they're our role models. But in my private practice, and I have a lot of siblings that I work with, I find that the people that have had ambivalent relationships often have the most difficult times with the grief. They are grieving because they're grieving the relationship they never got to have.
And I know in the work I've done with siblings that, that is definitely that. I don't know that the last words I said were mean or I was angry, and I don't think they know that I love them and stuff. And I'm always saying, look, absolutely, because I've worked with some people who lost siblings due to drugs or alcohol abuse. Mm-hmm. And there's that, I don't know anything personally about that, but I certainly have studied a lot about it. And the lying, the stealing, all of the betrayal that goes on when someone is an addict And I always ask this question, even though you told them that you weren't going to help them, if they really needed you, would you have done it? And the answer is overwhelmingly, of course. They're my brother, they're my sister. If they really needed me, I'd be there. I'm like, and that's the important part. They knew, and there's the love. There's the important thing. You don't need to feel guilty because you would be there for them. They're your sibling.
And the other thing is sometimes we don't know how much our siblings mean to us until they're gone.
Well, absolutely.
And I've heard clients say, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how close we were. And I didn't realize what roles we played together, even if we had ambivalent relationships. And I didn't realize how important they were to me until they were no longer here.
Or even when a sibling, maybe the two siblings fight like cats and dogs, and one of them goes off to college or goes off for a job, joins the military or whatever. All of a sudden, when they're not around, you have that moment. And I know that your son has served us, and thank you so much for his service. But I also tangentially know that your daughter missed him as much as you did, probably.
Probably more.
I didn't want to, I don't want to say that a mom doesn't miss her son and stuff more. But yes, I think I got from talking to you, seeing pictures and stuff.
Yeah, it was an interesting thing for my son to join the military. He joined because he grew up in New York City in the wake of 9/11 and saw the work that I did with TAPS, which is the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors of Military Loss, and with the FDNY, and really wanted to give back to the country. I was very ambivalent because I was like, Alexander, we call him Zander as well. Zander, you know what I do for a living, right? Really? You're joining the military? I work with TAPS. So he was absolutely adamant that he did it. I had to let him go because I find that I have to be very careful about not being too concerned that something's going to happen to my own children.
Yeah.
I definitely go down that road in my head, and I'm like, Heidi, don't overparent just because your brother died. So so it's still impacting me as a parent.
Of course. Right? I mean, similarly, my biggest fear, right? Mm-hmm. Oh my God.
Yes.
And I honestly, I cut that off because I'm like, I cannot go down that hole.
Yep. Yes, exactly. When Alexander deployed to Afghanistan as an Army infantry, I definitely had to say, okay, Heidi, you've got to let him live his life and do him. Samantha, it was super hard for her to say, it was hard for the whole family. It was a very hard year. I thought it was actually going to be the second hardest year of my life after Scott died, but I didn't realize what 2020 had in store for us. This has been a hell of a year, right?
No doubt.
Crazy.
No doubt. Yeah, it's obviously sibling relationships are incredibly complex.
Yes.
And all of those things that happen, I know milestones in my life that I just always expected Lucy would be there for. And I found that I always bring her along, but do it in my own way. I know some people will have the empty chair at the wedding for that missing person, and all of it is however you choose to do it is what's right for you. And don't let anyone tell you that if you want that extra chair, if you want their picture there, if you want some special remembrance, that's all. It's your life. You get to honor your sibling.
Yeah, I think that's important, Zander, because some people are private and they don't want to be public about it, and that's okay. And then others want to do something more public. I think where it gets difficult is when our parents want to do something different than we want to.
Absolutely.
And sometimes I will do things for my parents that I really don't want to do. For example, I don't like going to the cemetery. In fact, I hate going to the cemetery with a passion. My parents love it. So, I won't go all the time, but I will go sometimes just for them. And I don't like it. And they really like it, and I'll do it for them.
Oh no, absolutely. And it's all about choice, and you making a choice on how you want to grieve. And what I like to say to people is, you define your loss. It doesn't define you.
Mm-hmm. I like that. That's good.
Because I'm defining what the loss of Lucy means to me. And
Mm-hmm.
although it is an important part of my life, it is not all that I am. And I'm busier because I'm doing stuff for Lucy also, the same way that you and your family are doing stuff for Scott through the Open to Hope Foundation, through Compassionate Friends, and through the work that you all do is powered by Scott. It is to honor Scott, but it's also to celebrate Scott's life. I know we have the family foundation that we do in Lucy's memory. And I can tell you that for the last 20 plus years, it's made it a lot more rewarding to honor Lucy doing good things than just being sad all the time and focusing on the fact that she died.
I think when I focus on being sad, which I did initially, that's focusing on the way he died. And when we focus on the positive, we're focusing on the way that they lived. And Lucy and Scott died suddenly. It was a short amount of their life, right, where they were dying. But they lived these full lives. Lucy was in law school. Scott was quarterback of his football team and catcher of his baseball team. They were living amazing lives.
They were. And one of the things quippy sayings I came up with, but I want to share it because I like it, which is you can focus on the dot at the end of the rainbow, or you can celebrate the rainbow that was their life. And I choose to celebrate Lucy's rainbow. You choose to celebrate Scott's rainbow, because frankly, rainbows are beautiful. Yes, they have an ending, and it's not ignoring that, but it's saying that's not all that person was.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest question that a lot of parents have is, will a sibling loss destroy my child's life? And the reality is, as the research is showing, that there's post-traumatic growth after sibling loss. And no, yes, we want our siblings here, but they're not here. And we grow as siblings in profound ways because we had sibling loss. Oftentimes we're more empathic, we're more spiritual, we appreciate relationships more, we can handle adversity better. There's all sorts of ways that we grow after these losses, as both of us know.
Oh, absolutely. And I also think, this makes me sad to have to say this, that a lot of that growth comes on our own because there isn't, as we've been talking about, there's not a lot of support. There is support out there. It's just, you have to work hard to try and find it, unfortunately.
I agree. And one of the reasons I started the Open to Hope Foundation, my mom and I, is because in 1983, when my brother died, which was a very long time ago, there was nothing available. And we didn't even have the internet. So I was like, okay, what did I want that I didn't have? What I wanted is a support system 24/7. What I wanted is to be able to log on to the internet and watch Zander's podcast, watch Zander as a guest on our Open to Hope show, Google sibling loss and find him, and be able to watch his words of wisdom at 2, 3, 4 in the morning when everybody else was asleep and I was grieving and feeling like I was all alone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wish I'd known about the Compassionate Friends and Open to Hope in 1996, or maybe 1997 is the end of 96 when Lucy died. But I didn't, but I'm so grateful that I do know all of this now. I'm so grateful that I got to meet you. I remember, I want to tell this story because this is funny. I wasn't even planning to go to the national conference. I live in California. I was back east at my family's place in Maine, and the national conference was in Boston. And just last minute, I'm like, I got to go. And I had heard Heidi's name a couple of times. Someone's, oh, you got to talk to Dr. Heidi Horsley. She does sibling stuff. So I got to the conference and I spent a half a day chasing Heidi around the conference, trying to get a hold of her. And I remember I finally ran into you at the end of a session you were doing. And I'm like, hi, I'm Zander Sprague. And you're like, you're Zander. Oh my gosh, I've heard about you. And it was great. And
people kept coming up to me and saying, you have to meet this guy named Zander. And since I call my son Zander, I'm like, there's someone else that goes by Zander? And they kept saying, you've got to meet him. He's really dynamic. He's really passionate about building awareness for sibling loss. Heidi, you will totally connect with him. So I was like so happy when we finally did. I'm like, finally, here's the Zander that I keep hearing about.
Exactly. Heidi, I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and talking about sibling loss, because it is obviously a huge passion for both of us. It is our work. And for those of you out there who may have experienced a loss, you're not alone. And Heidi's here, I'm here. The Compassionate Friends are available, the Open to Hope Foundation. You can Google those. They're local meetings for Compassionate Friends. What Heidi and her mom, Dr. Gloria Horsley, are doing, their show is fantastic. I've been honored to be a guest a few times. There is help available.
Absolutely, Zander. And I also want to let people know there's Open to Hope. There's Facebook pages for Compassionate Friends, TCF Sibs and Sound of the Siblings you can join. Zander's active in both of those. They're wonderful. You can go to opentohope.com to watch any of our cable shows or our podcasts. And we always end our shows by saying, if you've lost hope, please lean on mine and Zander's until you find your own.
Absolutely. Heidi, thank you so much for joining me today. It's always a pleasure to get to talk to you. Please be well, be safe.
I will. Thank you so much for continuing to build awareness for a very important topic, sibling loss.
Absolutely. All right. Goodbye, all. Have a great day.
Get your gift copy of the award-winning book, Epic Begins with One Step Forward, at epicbegins.com. That's a wrap on this episode of Epic Begins with One Step Forward with your host, Zander Sprague, best-selling author, internationally acclaimed public speaker, and licensed professional clinical counselor. To make your next conference or event epic, send an email to Zander at zander@epicbegins.com. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Remember, epic choices, epic life.